Yo, what's popping with the Ultra Late Night NA reviews for the second day of the second week of the Countdown Cup. The most important one, or the most interesting one, being the San Francisco Shock against the Atlanta Rain, but that's all the way at the end. So scroll to that one if you're interested, because the other two are just kind of rolls, not gonna lie. But before I get into that, like this video, subscribe if you like this kind of content. I do upload daily, and yeah. So Dallas Philly and London to fire, just a 3-0 for Dallas. And honestly, this is kind of the result you have to expect, because like come on, London haven't looked that good, and the wins they do have are not exactly revolutionary. So you have Dallas playing Doha, Edison, Hanbin, Chio, and Fielder, with London playing Backbone, Sparker, Hadi, Admiral, and Khan. Lijiang is a 2-1 for Dallas. They play a Sombra, Reaper, Zarya, Lucio, Ana, but May actually come out, or London come out with the May, Sombra, Ryan, Lucio, and Moira. So I like that because, you're not going to beat Dallas unless you play the Reinhardt, because maybe it's another thing, like no one's playing it, so you might be able to catch him off guard. They almost win it. Actually, they almost win it. 100 to 99. Dallas do though. So Night Market is mostly like they do a great job. They take the first point because Edison gets hacked, and once Edison is hacked and killed, you have free reign to just kind of walk onto the Zarya comp. No Reaper stops you from really any harm. So they do really great there, and then they hold them really strong. They don't let them through the choke. It's looking really great. But Hadi gets slept after he earth shatters, so he just dies, and Dallas end up flipping. And once they have the point, it's lights out. They just hold that point the whole time. None of London's ults are really getting the value they needed with the Blizzard, with the EMP, any of it. And they just can't break through into a foothold on the point. At one point, they even try to swap over to a Symmetra, so they can TP to the point. It doesn't really work out. So Dallas end up winning. Gardens is a 100 to 93 for London, though, and Dallas played a Junker Queen even to try and get past this. But it's not... The Reinhardt combat is too good here. Yeah, hold on. So basically, one point about this Ryan comp is that they're on Moira. And at this point, Dallas go over to the Junker Queen and they play BAP, and the BAP it's a lot more value than the Moira just because my glasses are still fucking dirty. Hold on. I gotta clean. Okay, I can't stand talking with dirt on my glasses. Sorry. But anyway. So that the Baptiste pick is getting a lot more value than the Moira because like Moira can just output a ton of healing, right? But like the ammo actually lets Dallas kind of take a stand, and you have the Junker Queen, the Reaper that can get health back with the Baptiste anyway. So it just provides a lot more value. And if you're just swinging at ammo, you're just gonna die probably. However, as soon as London take control of this point, they really struggle. Dallas really struggled to get it back. Hadi gets a long range pin onto Hanbin, ends up killing him and flipping back, and then he shatters the Rampage. So then and then they get to OT eventually. And then Blizzard plus Cole is just too much for Dallas to overcome, and it turns into a London win. But it was very much like if they don't get that really long range pin, which doesn't happen, it's a pretty low percentage play, but it works out. And London come out on top. Then you do the Control Center, which is 100 to 43 for Dallas. They go back over to the May Reaper Junker Queen, and Hadi keeps trying to remove Hanbin, by running past him. So I don't know what that means, to remove Hanbin. He just keeps trying to go past Hanbin, but it just isn't working out because he gets knifed, he gets pulled back. Hanbin can go onto the back line. They can kind of bully Hadi around because Hadi, who is he running onto? The May Reaper Junker Queen BAP. He's running on a BAP, but like if that's the only target running onto, it's not going to be as effective, So London just do a pretty poor job dealing with Dallas kiting away from their aggression. So Dallas are able to retaliate back with better resources and win, and it happens again and again and again. Dallas do lose 43% to London, but like they control the pacing overall. And then we get Iconwall, which is a 3-2 for Dallas. Sparkle comes in for Edison, and Fearless comes over for Hanbin, and Shax comes in for Sparker. And then we get Sombra, Tracer, Winston, Brig, Autumn Mirrors. And another thing that keeps cropping up for London is they're not getting enough value from their ults, whereas Dallas are easily getting value. So they cap A after a long scrappy fight. London do, and then they go to B, and suddenly they just can't attack the Dallas backline. Dallas just have free easy dives onto the backline because they're on the castle, they have the high ground, so it's just easy to find the dives compared to London. Eventually, Backbone hits an EMP, gets through Chio's rally, and they push to the end of B, and Shax finds a huge stagger kill on the Chio with the pulse bomb. So London heading to C after a pretty suboptimal recontest because there was no Chio. But on C, Dallas, they just kind of dissuade London from pushing him with hacks. And even when Fearless does go a little too aggressive and falls, they're able to use Doha's EMP to kind of stop London from pushing and wait for Fearless to get back, and Dallas ended up holding out pretty well. But it was just a really good job controlling the tempo for Dallas. Even whenever they weren't supposed to be able to, if they were down members, they were finding a way to do it. Then on Dallas offense, immediately on the defense, Hottie jumps in, gets anti and dies right away. So Dallas just insta cap A. And then they move point. They EMP the high ground. London falls over. They do a great job getting onto that backline, actually applying a lot of pressure, which is something London struggled with. But London are able to EMP and stabilize with the backline falling short. And then they go super aggro with Nano Hottie. But Dallas just say, okay, we'll trade backlines, and then they Nano Fearless in the DPS, and they have better odds. So then they push the point into the very end on C, and they end up winning. So that, like, Hottie's dive there, it wasn't bad, but I think the DPS follow up wasn't with it, because Hottie, go MVP nomination, which is, I don't know. Well, I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like maybe not the best, but anyway, Dorado 2-1 win for Dallas. They're still playing the Sombra Tracer. London do play the Widowmaker instead of the Sombra, just because, Backbone Widow may as well go crazy. But like, they don't really push that far forward. There's a big problem here where Fearless just keeps inting onto Khan, and Khan is super omega dead, like perma dead in the spawn room. But anyway, Backbone does end up getting some good picks on the Widowmaker. He gets them through A pretty much. Kind of. I mean, Nano Fearless does just win, and what gets him through A really is Khan's Transcendence, letting the backline live through the dive. But from there on out, on B, Permadove, super dead. The backline's just not living, and they're not really pressuring the backline at all. There's no real high ground control there. Letting get the push under the bridge, but like really, it was like you may as well have not pushed at all. And with Dallas on the offense, they put Doha on the Echo, and Backbone stays on the Sombra this time, no Widowmaker. And Doha is just going crazy. He has nothing to really contest him against the Sombra Tracer. Hottie gets focused down. He can't play very aggressive, especially with the... Well, not even with the Zen, because there is no Zen. But like, he just can't play aggressive with the beam going out. And Dallas just roll into B with ultimates, and they just ult out, and they just kind of win on B. So it's just a roll. And Thomas can play the match. He's going to go to Fearless. Super diff from Fearless. Much better on the Winston than MVP nomination Hottie. He had 9.2 final blows per 10, and that is insane on the Winston. Like, that is unreasonably good. And the Dallas dive just lined up perfectly with the DPS, and London, the backline was literally in the spawn room more than they weren't. Like, especially on Dorado. So there's Fearless in the dive was super great from Dallas. And it's not like Honda played poorly, but like the Fearless maps were way less close than the Honda map. That's all I'm saying. Then we go over to Washington against New York. Ends up being a 3-1 for Washington. This one's not really a roll, but like kind of. Sort of, kind of. Nepal ends up being a 2-1 for New York. And, the rosters are just going to be as they're going to be, Assassin, Decay, Kalios, Krillin, and Opener, against Yaki, Flora, Kellen, Ho1, and Ansunjae. But Genjin does come in for the second to last map, I believe. So Village, they roll out on Orisa, May, Reaper, Doom, Bap, Lucio. Washington do, and New York roll out on Genji, Sombra, Doom on Lucio. So the Doomfist against the Orisa was programmed in the lore, has lore buff over Doomfist. And they do win the first round. Because Kalios is just running it into the backline. He just is aggro as hell, just running it. And there are times where he gets a bit too aggressive, and Krillin can't keep him up, especially if Kellen dives him and they lose. And Washington really struggled to get past the chokes originally. But then Krillin goes over to the Moira after his window gets EMP'd and gets no value. And then Kalios managed to live on and go onto the backline and gets a big Terra Surge, which actually gets a kill, I believe. And so maybe that's probably like the first Terra Surge kill in Owl, because that's a dog ultimate. And New York try to commit while Washington aren't at full strength. So then it devolves into a super scrappy fight. But Assassin gets a Blizzard, ends up killing Kellen, and from there New York just kind of crumble because they don't have the point pressure. Then we have Shrine, where Kellen goes on the Zarya and stays off of the Doomfist, and Washington play a Sombra Tracer Zarya on Lucio themselves, and actually is a New York 100-99 victory. Yaki immediately gets focused down on the Genji and swaps over to the Reaper. And New York just aren't really gaining any pressure on the point at all. It does actually work in the end because Flora hits a solo EMP on the Opener, and he somehow gets no help for a long-ass time, and he just dies. So Kellen gets a grab, and then Blossom kills. And they're actually doing a really good job of holding on somehow. Like, they should have just lost, it felt like. But Assassin hits an EMP very late into the round in overtime, and the Nano gets on Kellen, so he ends up living, doesn't actually fall. Even though he's not high energy, just the presence that he has on the point, the bubbles he was providing, actually gets New York the win, because the EMP didn't actually get the value it was supposed to, and so they just kind of lost. So yeah, then we go over to Sanctum. It's 100-0 for New York. Yaki's back on the Reaper to start. Flora's on the Soldier, and Kellen's on the Zarya, and Yaki's just walking on them. Washington are not being able to walk anywhere. They just get held on the choke on Sanctum, and they just kind of get dominated. I don't know. It was like Yaki just decided, you know what, I'm the goat at Reaper. I'm the top three flex DPS Reaper, and they just kind of roll. But that unfortunately for New York doesn't really happen for the rest of the series because we get Pariso, which is a 2-1 for Washington. They're on the Diva against Zarya, and honestly, New York on their offense, they just kind of run it. Assassin dies easily, and Kalios gets DMAC, and then Nano Kellen just kind of stuffs the recontest, and they just cap A. But on B, big trouble because they don't actually really push in anywhere. They push the card a bit, and then they rotate the high ground. They just keep slamming their head into the wall there because Kalios goes over to the Zarya now, so they don't have to worry about the Diva. But they just never actually pressure the backline at all with any bubbles or dives or anything. Because they're playing the Genji Sombra, so they don't have the Reaper to TP onto that high ground. So it's just Yaki. And I guess you could say Flora are able to commit dives kind of to the backline, but it never really works out. Like there's times where you see Yaki go for a blade, and Flora will just sit cloaked in the backline, doesn't actually even pull out for a hack or EMP or anything. So I don't know if there's like a disconnect there or what the goal is whenever they do those kind of plays. But it just felt like they weren't able to really contest the Washington backline at all, and they weren't able to break through the front line either, so they just didn't do anything. But yeah, so Washington on their offense, Kalios, no diva this time, just right on the Zarya, and they just kind of run it as well. Yaki ends up taking Krillin, but then he dies and swaps over to the Reaper because he was on the Genji. But then a high energy Kellen kind of holds out. But Washington slowly, next fight, they slowly grind out point presence. And New York looked like they're going to recontest because they lost the guy, so they just backed up. But then they just don't. And I have no clue why they didn't. And then they just kind of lose the next fight anyway. So Washington push up a bit. Then they do the same thing. They pull up to the high ground cord like New York did. But then instead of losing the frontline battle, they actually win the frontline battle and they won. So I don't know what New York was doing there. Like they didn't know what they wanted to do again. And on their offense, they didn't know how they wanted to attack the backline. On their defense, they didn't know if they want to recontest or what was going on. Because I understand not recontesting, but even then, where you were set up wasn't an ideal location to try and hold there either. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me either way. And you get more of that even on Junkertown. It continues to happen. And Coliseo. It just they weren't sure what they wanted to actually do at any given moment with any given like play state. So on their offense, Washington playing a Sombra Tracer Diva on a Lucio with New York playing a Genji Widow Sigma Zen Brig. So basically, it's a matter of well, how much can Flora do on the Widow, or how little can Washington negate it. Anyway, Washington on their offense, Decay and Assassin just kind of kill Ho1. Washington just walk into Kellen. Flora doesn't find anything, so they just lose. Washington just cap A instantly. And then Washington actually cap B after one fight win, but they do lose one whenever Kellen hits a flex on a Kalios, and Kalios just grabs him midair, which looks really great because there was a whole bunch of New York just floating. But they didn't actually kill anything with it because it was kind of like a bad grab anyway. So Kalios goes over to the Diva now. But Washington hit an EMP dive on Ho1. It's good, and they just cap B after one fight. Again, no real recontest there. But they struggle on C quite a bit. They struggle to get the high ground, and Kellen's controlling it very well on the Sigma, actually. And the Washington supports just get kind of rolled. And they struggle to get onto the New York supports. So it's just like, you don't have anything that can really break that high ground or control the Sigma in any way. Like Diva kind of can, but it's a little scuffed. And I don't know, they just kind of lose. Opener gets hacked out of beat at one point, and that's not great for them. And Assassin gets an EMP, doesn't do anything. So New York hold at the last corner of C. And then New York's offense was just tragic. Krillin on the Zen opener, the Ana, and Yaki on the Tracer. And the New York backline consistently just dies way before they even set up their dives, and they still have, the Sigma comp, so it's super slow. They go over to the Zarya on a Lucio eventually, but it's like, it doesn't help because Ho1 and Gangnam still insta-dies basically at the start of every fight. They kind of get something going there at the end because Flora gets a kill on Krillin, and Assassin's EMP isn't really good enough. So Washington kite back for a recontest, and on the recontest, it looks like it should be good because Kellen has grav, Demex Kalios, and you think they can find a grav there and probably win, but he actually lets Kalios get back in and dies in overtime and holds the grav. So it's like, what are you waiting for? What more of an opportunity do you need other than Kalios just being Demexed? I don't get it. Like, even kill the baby Diva gets you some value out of it. At least they don't have the tank anymore or anything. It just didn't really make any sense. That's like, he didn't know what he wanted to do on it. He's just not familiar with how to play these characters, I guess. I don't know. In Coliseo, it is a, hold on. Also, there's an 88 meter to 45 meter win for Washington. Antunjay comes back in, and you get Washington playing the Diva into the Sigma still. And it's just like, New York aren't really finding a fight win here. They're playing so slowly. Eventually, they both end up on Zarya. I think they were on Zarya in the first place, to be honest. I think this might just be wrong. But anyway, yeah, it's just like Kalios on the Zarya just kind of diffs Kellen on the Zarya the entire time. And Kellen eventually sauced to Winston, and it's like that's not it wasn't awful for them because they do get like almost to the checkpoint, I guess, as you take the small dubs. But basically, Washington get the checkpoint, and from there it's just like they're not losing. They're going back and forth between EMP fight wins, grab fight wins. They'd have to fumble pretty hard to not at least be able to stop them on one of those. Because like with the rotation they had, it's like, yeah, I just straight up copied this. They weren't playing this comp. These are fake. These are fake. Um, but yeah, so yeah, just back and forth EMP grab fight win. It was pretty much just like they weren't rolling, but New York definitely weren't winning very many fights. And my player of the match is going to be the Kalios. I think he's a pretty easy pick. Was pretty much outperforming Kalio or Kellen in every matchup, whether it be on the Zarya, the Diva and the Zarya, Sigma, whatever it is. Kalios was always there. He was always doing the most. And Kellen just, he just wasn't comfortable on his characters, man. I don't think he was because like he just didn't have the game plan, didn't know what he wanted to do. It felt like New York were just kind of aimless, didn't have any real goals. And Washington, while their goals were normally just intel to the enemy backline, that was at least a goal, and they achieved it. So good for them. And now we have, oh my goodness, the San Francisco Shock against the Atlanta Reign. Shock playing Striker, Proper, Kaluge, Finn, and Violet, and Venom. Atlanta playing Venom, Speedily, Hawk, UV, and Vigilante. Ends up being a 3-2 reverse sweep win for the Shock. Yeah, they come back on top, but you know what? The first two maps were pretty much, well, it wasn't all Atlanta, it was decently close, but it was like, Atlanta definitely looked like they were just going to win the series. So on Lijiang, it is a 2-1. And Shock playing Tracer, Sojourn, Sigma, Zen, Bap, with Atlanta playing Tracer, Junkrat, Orisa on a Zen on Control Center. Now, the Sigma into the Orisa on the Control Center, sure, why not? And Shock just kind of roll this because they let Atlanta kind of play that high ground area because they don't want to really contest the Junkrat in white. But like don't really push out either. So like they lose the first fight and then they go Speedily on the Sombra and Hawk on the Diva. And Jock just told out they don't even use very many ults whenever it comes to overtime and the ult fight's going on. The flux out values whatever the Diva bomb is if they even had it at that point. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like just right off the rip, it wasn't very good. Shock knew how to play around it. They gave them the white room. It's all good. Then you get guards, which is a reverse, 100-0 for Atlanta, and you get Striker on the Sombra, Proper on the Tracer, Collusion on the Diva, and then Speedily goes over to the Echo, and it's a great work from Speedily on the Echo right here. And that's kind of how it is until you get the turning point where Proper does play the Sojourn, and they say, fuck the Sombra. We're just going to play Sojourn. We're just going to run it. And it works much better for Shock once we get there. But, like, from here on out, it's just like Atlanta just kind of take the initial caps. You're getting super long, scrappy fights going on. No cohesive dive from Shock. Striker EMP does nothing. And Speedily's applying a lot of pressure from the sky, so Atlanta just kind of roll that round. And then you get Night Market, which is similar, 100-15 for Atlanta. And again, Shock really struggled to get out of the chokes after that initial cap from Atlanta. And Speedily still putting out immense pressure from above, and it's not like they can really do anything about it. You can look at him, but it doesn't really work because you have Venom in the backline doing a lot. And Violet goes over to the BAP, but it doesn't really help him anymore either. And it's like Striker gets the flip for that 15%, but Shock still fall over. And a lot of the time, you'd get Striker kind of peering a little too early, I think, for the dive to happen, so he'd be forced to translocate back before they can actually go in and do anything with Proper. And I feel like that was definitely a communication error, because there's just no reason for Striker to appear early. Yes, he should appear first, or at least at the same time, I would say would be ideal. But, like, I don't know, just some poor errors there. And then you get Paraiso, which is a 3-2 win for Atlanta. You get Shock playing the Tracer, Echo, Diva, Zenana. And guess what? That's also what Atlanta plays. Is that true? They both played Echo? I don't even remember that. Anyway, Atlanta just kind of bowled through A and B. Shock kind of slowed them down on C a little bit because the Echo wasn't as strong there. But, like, it was pretty bad. Like, Atlanta still full cap this, right? And they used their ults to get in. But basically, like, Speedily was doing a lot. And they just didn't have any way to deal with him. And then you get Shock on their offense. They cap A pretty easily with a good pulse by Kalush, who popped off in the end here. He was eating so many different pulse bombs from Venom by the end of this, whether it be on Sigma, on Diva, whatever it was. He was doing a great job there. But Speedily, again, on this Echo, very uncontested, doing so much. And the Atlanta backline was not under a lot of pressure there either. Eventually, Hawk does overstep a little bit out of LOS from the backline and a duplicate Ana from Speedily, so he just kind of loses and Shock ended up capping through. But on C, Nanocluse gets you to the end, but then Venom gets a stick on the Finn, and then from there they just kind of crumble with no Ana healing. And then it doesn't flip a switch, but it is quite there is a flip switch. Yeah, sure. So you get Junkertown, which is a 3-2 for Shock, and this is where they just say Tracer, Sojourn, Sigma, Zenbap into a Tracer, Sombra, Diva, Ana, Lucio. And it's like, Atlanta on their offense, they hold for a bit, and then it's very hard for Atlanta to get on top of Kaluge with Proper in the backline of the Sojourn, because Proper on the Sojourn is probably, like, Kilo, better than that guy. So I think, like, the Tracer Sojourn, when you're playing Striker Proper, is probably better than Proper plus Kilo, just because of how good Proper is. And Striker, while he's not all that, he's able to still apply pressure, and Proper's just such a force in the Sojourn, can just take over the game. And it's not like he was super popping off every fight, but it was just like he was consistently applying a lot of pressure, finding a lot of kills, making it very hard for Atlanta Rain to get into the backline and like have HP. And that meant a lot. Anyway, eventually Atlanta get through A. And Kaluge goes over to the Diva, and Shock holds really well on B for a while. Speedily gets a bad EMP, and Proper on Sojourn's doing so much pressure. However, eventually he gets slept. Proper gets slept. Venom can't find the kill, but he does deflect the rail into Violet's head. So some self-reporting there, self-damaging, team killing. I'm trying to think of team killing. No way, I just said self-reporting. And Atlanta end up capping D off of it. But if he doesn't hit that headshot, if he doesn't hit the deflect into Violet's head, there's a good chance they just hold that anyway. And then Shock get around the bend. And like that's it. Like the Atlanta DPS don't get kills in the backline. There's no nano for the blade. So the Shock just kind of hold around the bend. That's it. Solid. They get the support outs better. They do a really good job on controlling the high ground. Just same old Junkertown C story. Then you get Shock on the offense. They're just slowly gaining ground, but there's no real damage anywhere. There's no real death occurring. Eventually, Atlanta do find a dive on the Shock backline, but Shock pushed into the open area, and from there, it lets them do a great job and actually get through eventually. So this really weird moment where Striker just straight up 180 pulse bombs nothing, and it's like, what are you going for? Like, are you trying to get an invisible Speedily, but he's just going to translocate away, so that's not going to do anything. It was just really weird. I don't know, maybe it was a fat finger, maybe he was just trolling. But if it was a troll, it was good for morale, because I win that fight anyway. And then they run through B. Atlanta gets pushed back. They don't really contest at all, and they roll through C, and then Proper just get 4 kills with the overclock, and they just win. So Proper's on top. Proper's ready to go on the Sojourn, and he just continues, because you get Coliseos, a 62-47 for the Shock. Again, they're playing the Sigma into the Diva, and Proper opens with a kill on Vigilante, because that's what Shock's comp has to do. They can't really be aggressive. You can't expect Striker to just go kill the backline, especially into the Tracer. And what you'll notice here is that Speedily's on the Echo, but he really doesn't do anything. He swaps over to Genji. He recognizes he's not going to be able to get the job done here. And Shock gets some good push. And just as they approach the high ground, Nano Hawk goes in, makes a lot of space, and the DPS win. It is pretty back and forth. 62-47 is very close. But it just felt like Atlanta were held in that neutral position for about 3 minutes. Like, until there were 3 minutes left, rather. And their only real way to actually make space and push through to get the Atlanta DPS any space was putting Nano Boost on the Hawk. And that wasn't a foolproof strategy. There are times where you get... where you're able to mitigate the Hawk damage. Like, you have his Baptiste, you have his Zenyatta, you can just discord him, you have Immortality. You're not entirely worried because you have a Sigma still, too, that can eat up the damage. And it's not like either of your DPS are going to die there most of the time. So, while it does make space for the DPS to win, if the DPS doesn't pop off, or you try and like mitigate the space he takes, it doesn't really work. But basically, Shock didn't get the checkpoint, because 62 is not good enough for the checkpoint, but they also didn't really need to, because any time that Atlanta would like pull up to like that bridge area that you have to push into if you want to try and push towards a checkpoint, it didn't really work. They get picked off really. Speedily invested in EMP down 2, which really hurt them because it was super late into the round at that point. And Shock just kind of went out at 62-47, a gruel fest. They were hard to push into more than not, basically. And then you get Oasis, which is a 2-1 victory for Shock. They're on the Tracer Sojourn still with the Diva Zenbap, with Atlanta playing the Echo instead of the Sojourn, and the Ana instead of the BAP. But you know what? I don't hate you if you put Violet on the BAP. That's kind of a comfort pick for him. I understand that. And I don't like the Echo anymore for Speedily. It feels like he hasn't really adapted to the Sojourn. He's still playing like it's just a Tracer Sombra and no one can touch him. So he's really not getting enough value anymore. And Proper just limiting the damage he can do. But anyway, City Center is 100-99 for Atlanta. So, 199 room for Atlanta City Center. And it's going to be back and forth. But mostly, again, Atlanta finding the most consistency fight wins by using a Nano onto Diva and getting space for the Speedily on Echo and the Tracer to do things. Because you're not going to put it onto the Genji. I mean, Nano Echoes was an option. It probably got used a little bit. but mostly it was putting the nano on the Hawk and just letting him go crazy onto the backline. Oftentimes that would either create enough space for the damage players to kill the backline, or he would just raw do it himself. But whenever that didn't happen, it felt like Shock were able to push back better, and just kind of force out wins like that. Venom was getting the better end of Striker, specifically in this point, as like undoubtedly able to force Trank out with stickies, able to win the duel against Striker, sometimes with the assistance of him getting ran over by a car. But you know what? You do what you got to do. And Atlanta get the win out in the end. But it was like, it was very close. And then you get University, which actually just a 100-0 for Shock. Kalush goes over to the Sigma, and Hawk goes to the Orisa. And once again, it just doesn't work because Finn kills Vigilante, and he puts a bunch of orbs in the Hawk, and Shock hate the point control because he can't do it anymore. And Nano Speedily does nothing, and then Shock just kind of push in through it and win. So Hawk swaps over to the Diva there because the horse isn't getting the job done. But then Striker continues to go crazy, or goes crazy, I guess. He does do very well in this specific point, and the Speedily Echo continues to just not be as effective since Shock just Sombra. He's not getting the same value. He's being looked at by Proper, and he's getting forced down. Even if he isn't getting outright killed a lot of the time, he's getting forced back. And it's making them take a lot more time to get the value out of Echo, which means Shock can play faster. Or they can play slower to play faster. Like, they don't have to commit as fast. Because your race against the clock is much more forgiving whenever Speedily is getting kind of mitigated. And then we got Garden, which is 100-49 for Shock. Amo gets used early, and Kalush insta-dies Speedily, so it looks good for Atlanta right off the back. But then Atlanta lose out because the Shock backline lives through their dive. Nano Speedily can't find a way in to get the kills again. And Shock flip, and then Speedily Dupe gets nothing. Proper sticks, but Violet has a clutch lamp at the ready. Hawk is forced to remech. Like, Proper, and Speedily doesn't do anything. That's just a story. It's like the game plan of Atlanta got countered. Shock adapted to it, and Atlanta didn't adapt back, and they just kind of lost. That's what basically this entire, after the first two maps, is what it is. And no, they didn't really play the Echo very much on Junkertown, right? So Junkertown's not really close here. Their plan was to play Echo, but the Sigma really slowed them down, is what it was. And it works out pretty well. So anyway, Thomas will play the match. It's got to be Proper. He basically he was the one that had the game changing hero pick, the game changing gameplay that put Shock on top, and like he did really well. And no, he wasn't consistently popping off, getting a crazy 4Ks, 5Ks. He got some, but it was mostly the consistency in the picks is what you need to be effective. And it's better that he was mitigating speedily and being effective himself than to like go super aggro and try and pop off. But Proper was great. Striker played pretty good on the Tracer. I don't like him on the Sombra very much. Kaluge was great as well, but Proper it's Proper. It's Proper. So yeah. Anyway, like this video, subscribe if you like it. Thank you so much for watching, and have yourself a good one.